What's up everybody, welcome to TeslaFix. Today I have a very special episode here because I'm at the Tesla Showroom in Zurich, because here is a Tesla bot that we can look into. And we have also a lot of interesting cars here. Excuse me sir, could you maybe move over? Oh, Scott Walter is here as well, of course.
Jan, fancy meeting you here.
I'm glad you're here in Zurich. So this is the Christmas special kind of. And we're gonna go through the Tesla bot and see what's new there and compare it to the newer model. And afterwards we're gonna take a Glühwein. How about that?
Yeah.
So Scott, here is the beauty. We didn't know it is actually still here in Zurich, but now it is.
We discovered it yesterday that the Generation 1 Tesla bot, Optikin, is still on display here. We didn't even know there was one in Europe. We knew it was displayed in the US quite a bit. But yeah, here we have it. And we know there was a lot of changes announced on Tuesday. And we'll be able to kind of take a look at what some of those changes are on the original one. It's now white instead of silver, was the first thing. And everyone noticed a couple of differences here. One of the mechanisms that has changed a little bit here is on the wrist. Basically the same mechanism, but if you look kind of closely at the wrist, we'll kind of look right here. You see how there's like a lot of empty space right in there? There's kind of a gap. And you see how wide that piece is there? Now imagine taking that and then kind of angling it in a little bit, because there's some room to rotate it in. And that's what they did. By doing that, they reduced the length of that arm a little bit. And now that means it's more narrow, which is exactly what you want in a wrist design. So basically function the same. However, something that is a little bit interesting, when we look at the new generation, we'll see that there's a lot of covers on some of the different joints. Clearly this is covered up quite well right now. And it appears it's the same mechanism behind there, just well covered. But down here on the elbow, they may have done something different, because you will notice on the Gen 2, they have a piece of black fabric that comes around like this. A little bit of it's up here, but most of it is down there. And that black fabric is there because there's something underneath it that's moving around that needs to be protected. It doesn't make sense based on the original mechanism. Because if you look at this mechanism, you'll see all the movement is back here. That's where it's going to be popping out. I suspect that they took this mechanism and moved it around the other way up here. And that's why the covering is changing it. So same basic idea, but I think they turned a few things around. Now something else that I just noticed when I came here, everyone kind of talked about how narrow the pelvis is now. Now, you see, it's always been narrow. You see, it always has something very narrow there. But what it does is it pops out now when you look at the new one. And the reason it pops out is that you see how this thing kind of angles on down? The new one is coming down more square. And that's why it looks like it has a really narrow hip, because the torso is a bit bigger. Why would the torso be bigger? Maybe more batteries? Or something else is kind of going in there.
New hardware maybe as well?
Yeah, so I suspect it's a little bit bigger. And they also angled this a little bit different. That rather than come down like that, you're gonna notice it cuts like this and then goes straight on down and then in like this. You're gonna also see that these things seem to be lighter and tighter. So they've redesigned these actuators to be a little bit different. But overall, basically the same mechanism. Nothing radically changed, except of course, the neck rotates now. They put 2 degrees of freedom in there. It can rotate. Same idea, nicely covered up. You see, if I put my finger in there, that looks like a pinch point. You know, is that something you'd want to have your finger or someone else caught in there? Those other places. So they've made sure that's all nicely covered up in there as well. Those are some of the major differences. And the hands, you know, they've got new hands, but basically the same idea overall. So now, if you want to understand how these mechanisms work, it's a little bit difficult to see. But when you look at the hand, originally they designed the hand so that it could only make your hand go up and down like that. They kind of ignored this movement. They said, we really don't want to do that. But then they realized it was very important to get the dexterity that they needed. So they had to add another joint here. And the way they did it is, rather than doing it serially, where you take one motor and then attach it underneath another one to get that degree of freedom, they decided to use a slightly different kind of mechanism. Because what I want you to think of is, like, if you see this motor right here, if I rotate around this axis, all the rotation of that axis is coming just from that motor. That one cannot help me and that one can't help me if I want to rotate this way. But now if you get a parallel mechanism, you see we can, by pushing on here, make the wrist rotate about that. That's what gives you this movement, okay? But that's if we push it together. If we make them go opposite, suddenly the hand goes this way, okay? Now, if you look at your hand, you don't have a whole lot of motion in there. It turns out to be kind of an important motion. Nature's decided we need that. And originally Tesla thought, oh, we don't need that movement. And they realized, we do need it in there, but we don't need a whole lot of it in there. This gives you that movement, but it doesn't give you a whole lot of it. What it does give you a whole lot of is this. When you need a whole lot of this, you know how you get a whole lot of that? You got two motors doing it for you. So it's not like only one motor is doing it. Like up here, if you're rotating about a particular axis, you can actually use both of them to give you a lot of motion that way, and with differential movement, give you that other nice movement on the wrist. So again, we can see a joint through there. When this thing goes in opposite directions, the wrist is going to spin like that. And then when these go together, it rotates about here and gives us this movement. Same idea going on down here on the ankles. So your foot, if you look at your foot, typically your foot's going to want to flop like this a lot. And you can do a little bit like this, but you don't need to do a little bit of that. That's just more or less to get your balance right. But when you do this, you're doing that to jump. So again, we've got these big motors here. Two of them can combine together to really get it to get up on its toes and to provide a lot of power when necessary. So that's what's kind of nice about this parallel kinematic design, is that you can actually double the amount of effort that can go in a rotation about a particular axis. It's hard to see, but there are some pretty big actuators in here for the walking of the upper leg that are much stronger than one of these. However, two of these is about the same as the big one back there. So if you look at this motor here, which is needed to get it to rotate about the hip here, and there's another one in the front that makes the knee move, that's the advantage of putting both of them together. So that helps it to be able to walk more quickly, more efficiently, and I would say potentially be able to jump. Okay, what's some of the other things that they've modified? I'm sure they cleaned up this a little bit, but it's effectively the same thing. This, I think they brought it in a little bit. First of all, you see the pelvis?
Yeah.
What we call the pelvic girdle? They got rid of the front part of it. So you no longer have the badge in front. And they seem to have it only attached in the back. That is going to cause a little bit of savings on weight, no doubt about it. So we're going to be able to get rid of that. And I think those motors are shorter. They're no longer quite as big as they were before. Again, lighter and tighter, and that's where they get a little bit of mass savings. The other possibility is originally these things were all appeared to be out of cast aluminum. And probably also a lot of these other upper arm sections, etc., were also made out of metallic components. It's possible they're made out of plastic components now. And if they are, that's how you can start to shave up to 10 kilograms of mass from the original Gen 1 robot. Mass savings means you can move more efficiently, you don't require as much power, longer run time, etc. It means you can walk faster because you're not carrying as much mass down here. It's much easier to swing your legs without additional weight on there. So, and then the fact that it actually walks like this now. So it goes heel, toe, and then does that flexion. That is very important in allowing the robot to move more naturally and definitely more efficiently. 30% faster, probably without any additional power. So that's like a quick rundown of what's going on. You get an idea of the size. It's on a pedestal, so it does look to be a little bit taller than me, but it's probably only about, I think 5'9". We can come around here and we can see, I think, some of the changes they made in the hand. So first of all, you'll notice the hand only has two knuckles. They got a knuckle here and a knuckle there. And right in there, it's hard, you can't see it because this isn't the real thing, but you would normally see some spring mechanism. The springs are what make the fingers go pop up, okay? Now in there, hidden in the wrist, are small servos that are pulling on a tendon. And when they pull on a tendon, it causes the fingers to clasp. When you release the tendon, the springs will allow it to open. Now on my finger, I have 3 knuckles right here, 1, 2, 3. They decided to eliminate one of them. So you see the longer part here, or this part here is a little bit longer, and that is much longer, the lower part of the phalange here. The other thing you will notice, even though the fingers are all the same length, they seem to make a little bit of a curve. And the reason is you can see that the the middle finger is definitely offset from the others. You go along here, and that's what would give you the shape. It seems like in the new generation 2, they just decided to keep it flat across. And so now the fingertips are all at the same level. That's the one thing that you will notice. But it's pretty much the same, and it appears that they've added sensors on at least the tips, maybe also in the lower parts of the pads. We're not sure if that's just non-slip kind of pads or not. But right around there where those blackberries are now actually sensors. So they will be able to detect or tell if they're grabbing something and how hard they're grabbing. That's why they were able to do the movement of an egg from one hand to another, because they now have the tactile censorship. I suspect we're no longer going to be having the body piercings there.
Yeah.
And the reason is that the only reason that this hole was here was because this motor is used 1, 2, 3 places in there. And in every different configuration, there is some component that's necessary for it to work. And this motor, when it appears down here, needs that hole for this part of the pelvis. It's gone now. You no longer have that part of the pelvis, so you no longer need that to be connected in there, which means that hole is probably going to go away. The other thing I suspect is that if you look at the motor that's here for the roll that's going on the wrist, that's the only place it's used in the entire bot. So why come up with a special motor with all these weird little things sticking out on here, as you can see all the way around there, if it's only used in one place and these seem to be unused? And the reason is I suspect these motors are now up there.
Interesting.
And they're stacked together, and that is what these actuators are, probably the same actuators that are now being used for the neck movement. And the neck movement, of course, is this way and that way. It is not this way. It doesn't have any movement that way, so it only has 2. So my suspicion is that they found another purpose for these to go up there, which is why you have some of these strange things.
Okay.
Now, most of those things have probably been cleaned up. You know, now that they've gone through in the iterations, they've got rid of it. Because I was concerned that, hey, that's a snag hazard there. That's something that's going to get in the way. You'd like to clean it up and not have it there. So now that appears to be some of the things they've cleaned up. Again, different shape of the torso. Maybe bigger batteries. You know, that's what I'm guessing. Is they may have more batteries in there. It doesn't make sense otherwise for it to be bigger. And hopefully we'll get a Gen 2 model out here one of these days.
One of these days, a moving one, hopefully.
Yes, exactly.
This was a nice rundown so far. And we're going to, of course, talk about this more because we have the Christmas market and we're going to go there as well. So thank you very much also for Tesla Zürich to let us go in here and film this as well.
You haven't seen it live. I mean, you can come right down here and take a look at it here in Zurich. Again, I was surprised to realize it was actually in the showroom. It's well positioned and definitely something we're seeing when you come into Zurich along with all the other attractions downtown.
Now we are at the Christmas market, like we said, with Scott Walter here.
We took a look at the old Tesla Bot, knowing that there's a new generation of bot that's going to be coming out that we hope to see live eventually. But now we have an idea from the video, and so we just found a nice little place to walk around.
Yeah, here, the Christmas market in Zurich. We're going to walk around there.
For a lot of the Americans out there, they may not be used to this idea of a Christmas market. It's a very European thing. Every European city does it, because every European city has like a town center or Altstadt or some old area of the town. There's usually not traffic, so it's very easy to set up all these little kiosks, and it's really neat. It starts usually the 1st of December or like right after the American Thanksgiving, if you want to think of it that way. And it's just a great place to come out in the evening and meet friends, get a glühwein or a hot chocolate, eat some local street food, take a look, get a feel of the atmosphere, and just kind of talk about the year in review of what's happened with Tesla and what's going to be happening in 2024. We're searching for a glühwein somewhere around here. You want it around the corner, should we try?
Something like this.
We even have, I think, beer over there. Okay, so, Symbol, Prost.
Prost.
Okay.
All right, Scott.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Chin chin,
Chin chin. We went to the Tesla store and looked at the Optimus Bot from the past, the Gen 1 version. Now we have the new iteration, and I think for the viewer it's very important or interesting. How is this going forward with the bot? Because it's nice to see. I've seen many comments on my video talking about where's the backflip again? Many comments. Oh, what about, you never talked about Boston Dynamics, but the video wasn't the point of talking about Boston Dynamics. Since you're working in robotics, of course, every robotics company is interesting for you, of course. And Boston Dynamics has absolutely crushed the demonstration there and everything. The product is pretty interesting. Maybe you can tell the audience a little bit the difference.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question first. The last time you applied for a job, was part of the job description doing backflips?
No.
No, it wasn't.
No.
Maybe figuratively. Every now and then, you expect your boss expects you to do backflips to get that project done. But for the most part, you don't need to have athleticism unless you're a gymnast or a basketball player in most jobs. And so you do not need that. You just need to have a certain amount of mobility and dexterity. And Boston Dynamics can do backflips, but it doesn't have the hands.
Yeah.
So it actually isn't able to do a lot of the tasks that you like to do in the factory. And right now, the Tesla Bot is not designed to go in the house. It's designed to go in the factory. That's the whole idea, is to figure out how to reduce manufacturing costs, how to bring the margins down, and looking at the next generation factory that's coming along and designing kind of the factory around the automation, where Optimus is going to be an important part of that automation for the next generation vehicle. So we've talked about the second generation of the Tesla Bot, but we'd like to know what the next gen is of Tesla as far as the cars themselves. Whatever, is that the Gen 3 platform I think they're talking about? Something like that. So this is integral, because the idea, when Tesla designs a product, they don't just design the product, they design it for manufacturing. The two are intertwined so tightly together that they make sure that not only is it a great product, but it's a product we can actually mass produce. The Cybertruck, on the other hand, was they probably didn't think too much about how it was going to be manufactured first, and that has been some of the headaches that they've had. They're not going to be making that with the next generation vehicle, but definitely the Cybertruck, there was a little bit of delay getting it out because they had to invent new processes. And that was what was interesting to learn about at the Cybertruck reveal.
So you went to the Cybertruck reveal, and it's interesting to see. I've talked about with many experts as well on my channel, and with Lars and with Brian from my Tesla Weekend, of course. Also had an expert in crash tests and also regulation of Europe on my channel. I still have to edit that, but I'm so overwhelmed by all the content I have to put out. So I'm going to get that out. But still, it's so interesting to see the inventions that went into the Cybertruck, the platform of the production. What do you think? Do you think the Cybertruck production line will impact the other lines? I mean, for me, it's obvious.
They're going to learn some new techniques that are going to come over, but it is such a different vehicle than the others. So most of the other vehicles, you have a lot of spot welding going on in the vehicle. I'm not aware of any spot welding going on in the Cybertruck. It almost looks like there is none. And for us, it's like the magic of how are they actually getting those panels onto the car itself, because you cannot see any spot welds or any places where it's joined together. And it seems like they're using a lot of other adhesives and some other capabilities, perhaps using laser welding or something like that to get those panels onto the backing. So that's a little bit different. I'm not sure if they're going to do it in the next generation, but they're going to learn a lot. They definitely are. And they came up with a new way of doing bending, what they call air bending, which is interesting because whenever you take something in a tool and crimp it, you always end up getting some witness marks or others that are kind of left behind that shows that where you were clamping it down. They're trying to find a way that that if the tool is running over, it's going to make marks. And so if air is doing the bending, it doesn't leave marks.
That's true.
And so it's a new process, which is rather interesting to see. They clearly are using a lot of laser cutting because the panels are very precise. You can see that when you look at it up close, how precisely everything is cut out, and then also very precisely bent to be able to come together. So I was impressed looking at the vehicle to see how well made it is. It's very attractive up close. And you really have to see it in reality. And fortunately, you can't see it yet in Europe, but it is showing up in showrooms in the U.S. and it showed up in a showroom near me. And I went up and took a look at it up in Tampa. And it was quite impressive.
And for the regulation, again, I've covered that on my channel because I try to give the unique German perspective on Tesla. And of course, I'm located in Europe and I'm looking into this. And as far as I know, with everything from the lights to the shape, the shape, maybe, there is something there still to figure out, but everything else, The weight, also with the steer-by-wire, is also possible in Europe. We already had some approvals of that. The 48-volt architecture in combination is a new thing. This is true steer-by-wire in comparison.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The steer-by-wire before that was like an intermediate step between the old and new technology from the different car manufacturers. But also the guy in the Tesla showroom said also to us that just the crash test safety is still the last thing that the Europe have as a concern. And then we have to wait for the Euro NCAP results, and then it should go.
Do they know what the concern is? Is it with other vehicles?
It's just pedestrian safety.
Okay.
And based on my visual analysis and people I talk to, this looks like it has enough crumble zones and is soft enough. But we need the data from the sensors.
You need it. Now, the one thing that it looks to me when looking at the Cybertruck versus a normal pickup. A normal pickup is very high.
Yeah.
So if you get hit by a normal pickup, you get knocked down and you get run over.
Yeah.
If you get hit by the Cybertruck, there's a good chance that if you get hit, you would get actually flipped over on the top, and that is a much better outcome.
Yeah.
So it's not so high that it's going to knock you down. So that may be one of the things that's an advantage for
Absolutely.
and which I would think it will probably pass the pedestrian safety for that reason.
Yeah, I also agree. And let's see how it's going to unfold. But the more interesting thing here is talking about the compact now. The Cybertruck has a lot of technology that's going to go into the compact. The compact we know is designed for the unbox process.
Yes.
Is the Cybertruck as well designed for the unbox process, or still?
It could be.
It could be.
It could be. It doesn't look like it's using that.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know if eventually it's going to do that. But of course, one of the things that's going to go from the Cybertruck into the new vehicle is clearly a 48-volt architecture.
Yeah.
And that's very important for unboxing.
Yeah.
Because it means the harnessing that you're putting together is a lot easier to put together that actually complements the unboxing process. They're probably going to also use steer-by-wire in that. So a lot of those...
And brake-by-wire.
And brake-by-wire.
Yeah.
All that's going to move
because
over.
Brembo, the brake system developer or company, also developed brake-by-wire already, so it is possible. Their data there. And Brian, I have to give a shout out there. He had a very interesting theory that still I have to get to the meat grinder. Shout out to my Tesla weekend here. Mm-hmm. He said that if you can accelerate in 2.6 seconds, guess what? Your fail-safe could be the engine that brakes the car. A little bit slower than a real brake, but this could be the backup if something fails.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a fail-safe.
The funny thing about the brakes is that in a Tesla, you almost don't need brakes. Mm-hmm. And our friend John Gibbs, he had to have the brakes in his Tesla checked out. It wasn't working. And they took it to the shop, and it turns out the problem was he isn't using the brakes.
Yeah.
And that what happens is if brakes don't get used, they corrode a little bit. And all I had to do is take it out on the highway, drive it like at least up to 50 miles per hour, and then do a little bit of braking, and that fixed it. And it turned out that his brake pads are not being used because everything is being done with regenerative braking. Now, the only time, like in a Model 3 that has LFP, if you're charging up to 100%, there's a good chance that when you start using the car early on in the day, before it gets down to 80%, it will actually be using the brake pads because it can't use regenerative. But on the other cars that are LFP, people are usually charging up to 80%, so almost never doing it. So it looks like they're probably going to make some changes in the software to make sure that those pads actually get exercised every now and then. Because if you don't use it, it's not that they don't wear out, it's just that they kind of get sticky and won't work correctly due to less use. And this is the great thing about regenerative braking is that the brake pads, they have a lot of nasty chemicals in there. You know, cadmium and I think some other heavy metals that just end up getting sprayed everywhere because you get brake dust everywhere. It always ends up getting into groundwater and into our lakes and streams and all. So the more that we can reduce that, the better. So it's another plus for using EVs and regenerative braking. And again, like you said, it becomes like a fail-safe in many ways that it would be able to stop you if for some reason the brake pads failed or something else failed.
It's so interesting what's happening there. And now with Tesla Bot in the picture, we've seen the agility. And we also seen the footage of lines everywhere.
Yes.
I mean, we, as Tesla analysts in that sense, or analyzing Tesla, we always see those factories and we see that people still have to bend over and get into the small itty-bitty bits. And why do you think we can't use, for example, a robot arm to do that? Why is it so difficult? Why do we need humans still in that step?
Well, the humans, because the humans are just small enough to be able to fit into those different areas. So an industrial robot is a big brute. it's like asking King Kong to do the job.
Yeah.
It just won't fit in there. So you need to have someone that's a little bit smaller that actually has a fit
gentle,
arm. More gentle and also more mobile. So you're trying to crawl into these different spaces sometimes to that final assembly. Now the unboxing process is going to change it a little bit by making sure a lot of those things that were sort of happening in the final assembly that required people crawling in there, you won't have to do that as much. So it's going to be a lot easier to automate, maybe with other methods. And during the Cybertruck event, they did show, I think it was the front motor being assembled into the Cybertruck. It is being done with traditional robots. And part of it is because they've designed the whole thing to be easier to assemble. So the casting is a wide open fork and everything just kind of drops in. And so it's very easy for a human to do that. But if it's really easy for a human, it's even easier for a robot or for automation, in this case, the traditional robots. So I was looking at that and saying, wait a minute, those traditional robots just put Optimus out of a job there. Because that was usually one where a human operator would probably come over and bring it over with a lift assist because it's too heavy for a human. But they were able to get a really big, brutish robot to be able to pick it up, bring it over, and another brutish robot come in and then with the tooling, go ahead and do the fastening that was necessary. So you're seeing more and more automation along those lines, and some of it will be traditional, and some of it will be what used to be done manually. Optimus will just be able to come in and start to do a lot of it.
Yeah, it makes absolutely sense. I think also the on-box method, the speciality is that you have those separate parts. The structural battery pack is already the middle part of the on-box process, already in use at the Cybertruck. You can see that the seats are already mounted to the battery, and then lifted up. We've seen that in some of also the Model Y, I think. The new iteration of the Model Y was also done with the structural battery pack there as well. Yeah, it's interesting to see that. And
it's interesting to see that from the standpoint of final assembly. Because usually the final assemblies, you have to go through the body in white, and then the body in white has to get painted. Then after it gets painted, you can start putting things in. But because the Cybertruck doesn't have a painting process, they're reversing the order of operations on a lot of things. They're able to optimize it very differently because it's not like, oh, we can't do that process until it gets painted. It's like, no, you can do it early. So there's a lot of these things that they're able to get so basically there is almost like no such thing as final assembly anymore. It's just, we start building it up, we start putting things in.
It's like Lego.
When
you
it's
have
the easiest
Lego
time to put it in.
And
that's why you needed the humans towards the end, because it was so awkward to be able to get in there because you were assembling these things almost at the wrong time, but you had no choice because you had to paint the thing first. So now what you do is you say, wait a minute, before we start putting all these other body panels in there, let's go ahead and fit everything else in that we want in there and now start putting the body panels on. In the unboxing process, we'll do the same thing because whatever painting is happening, it's happening somewhere else and it's not a full body in white that's going through. So that's going to definitely be an advantage.
Everything that the Musk companies do kind of merge together more and more. You feel that. Everything is set up for the future in that sense. I think the Cybertruck was also it's not about the Cybertruck itself. It is, of course, about the vehicle, everything, but it's about designing a future vehicle, something that is never designed before. And with the unbox process in mind and the $25,000 car, in my opinion, will have stainless steel, will be the same cyber design as well as the van, because the van is actually just a Cybertruck with a different body on top. And that's why I also think the regulation and getting the Cybertruck here into Europe would be important for Tesla to have legislation ready to pump these things out immediately, because everything below the Cybertruck is possible.
There's going to be Cybertruck variants. There are. So we don't know if the next generation is going to be just like it. I mean, Tom Zhu did kind of wink when he said something about, painting is difficult or expensive. Almost like, okay, what are they doing? Is it going to be stainless steel or is it going to be made out of some other material that does not need to be painted? Or are they coming up with another way of being able to do the coating or something that is a very different process? But I do see that Cybertruck variants coming along. I know there's a lot of people that have dreamed it up and have done some AI, and they've done sort of like what Rivian did. So Rivian had the RT1 and I think it's the RTS, which is the SUV version of the pickup. And I've seen some versions of the Cybertruck like that rather than having the bed, extending it out like an SUV, that's a full 7-seater, and it looks absolutely nice. It's just like a Cybertruck, almost the same form. It's like, they could do something like that if they wanted to.
They could.
And it may not be like a cyber van. It's a little bit more almost like a minivan. But then you could have a variant which is a little bit bigger than that, which could be the true cyber van. So there's no doubt about it. It just depends upon whether they can see that this production process they can ramp up, and if they can get good volumes out of it, and it's very easy to do, they might say, yeah, we can come up with lots of variants, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah,
we don't know if it's true or not, but I think it's the governor of Nuevo Leon, where big Mexico is going. He claimed in a statement that they are going to be doing Cybertruck production also. Now, we don't know if that's been confirmed. A lot of people say that he may just think that that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, along with a second line that's probably going to be going in Giga Texas, they may be looking at very large volumes. And when you start to produce these large volumes, then you can start thinking of variants. And I'm sure at that point they would be thinking of a Cybertruck variant, as along with what we know is going to be, I think, what's called the Gen 3 vehicle, whatever the name of it is going to be. But it's the third generation platform that they're looking at, which we'll be using unboxing, and will be very low cost to produce, of course, and using all of the new technologies from the Cybertruck.
Do you think it's just cyber design, or will it be also for every other vehicle category, Model Y and everything? They want to use it.
I think eventually they would like to be able to use 48 volt architecture.
Yeah, but still painting is the big thing.
Painting is a big thing, so it's
for the unboxing.
So I would think eventually there might be like a refresh of the rest of the section line
after
they start to bring these things in. It's a question of whether they do refreshes or whether they're talking about wholesale replacement of like the S or the X or something like that, where there's something else, and the Y. So it's possible they could come up with a refresh that is a radical change to the existing structure that would use 48 volt.
So what do you think for the next year maybe, and for the coming years? What do you see the next big thing that you would focus on?
There have been some surprises. So the Cybertruck event in some ways was very low key. It turns out the after party was like the big event. That's where it was more fun than actually, obviously being able to get the tour would have been great, but they didn't have like a big party actually at Giga Texas. It was more or less an opportunity to sort of see the Cybertruck and see the delivery event. And we were thinking that, they're going to do some grand thing like they've done before, and maybe the Tesla Bot will come out and escort it, or they do something like that. But it turned out it didn't. And of course, the reason it didn't is because a week later is when we see the Gen 2. And so that absolutely makes sense. So it means there's a lot of surprises coming on. That in 2024, the first thing is AI Day 2. Or 3, sorry, AI Day 3. We haven't had it. We were supposed to have it this year. We didn't. Oh my God. It's going to happen in January or February. The reason it's waiting till then is there's 3 things that have to happen. It's AI Day. It's not Optimus Day. So that means they want to have Dojo up and running. They want to be able to talk about that. They want to have FSD 12 out. And they want to have like the new Gen Optimus. So they'll have all those things. And then it'll be interesting to see what they do when they display the new Gen Optimus, Gen 2 Optimus, to a crowd. Are they just going to show it on stage, or is it going to be more interactive? So we want to see that. The expectation, and Elon has already said it, and I believe it can be done, is that it will start to be doing useful work in the factories next year, meaning 2024. So we'll probably start seeing that, and then the videos that will start showing it doing real work on the production floor. And not just like a test to show that it's doing it, but literally doing shifts will probably wake up a lot of people that, wow, it's absolutely here. Of course, the breakthroughs that we're going to see with FSD 12 could be rather interesting to see how sort of human-like the driving is. I've had a good feeling of what FSD can do here and there, and every now and then it does a pretty good job, and it seems almost human-like, but in some cases it doesn't. It feels more like truly a student driver that's just trying to learn how to drive. And it'll be interesting to see how refined it is and whether it really knows how to do stuff. And of course, that's going to come along with the dojo. So we're going to see that. And then there's the ramp ups that are going to be going on. So how quickly does Cybertruck ramp up? Because when that happens, it really hits the bottom line big. And now we know like the Model 3 refresh is kind of done. So those numbers are going to start coming out really quickly. So that means next year, you're going to see the numbers of deliveries are going to be really impressive. This year, they were a little bit tamped down because of a lot of the retooling and some of the refreshing that was going on. But you're starting to see the groundwork that's going on. You'll see a little bit in 2024 if you're starting to come through. And then 2025, it'll probably become incredible. Because when you lay a foundation, a lot of good things can start to happen after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've mentioned here a point that's very important also to differentiate the Tesla Bot from Boston Dynamics from the Boston Dynamics robot. The Boston Dynamics robot is kind of hand-worked thing in a very low quantity.
It's very heuristic, right?
Yeah,
it's
almost like still in a kind of a prototype phase, not in a mass production phase, not with mass production in mind right now. I think, of course, they want to mass produce this thing, I can assume, but it's very expensive. It has LiDARs, it has to be programmed, still hard-coded more or less with the planned pass. That's why all the beautiful choreographies were actually taped many hours to get everything together, and then even sometimes it falls over and they have to reshoot stuff again. Of course, the Tesla Bot also had those programmed pass, I would assume, for
early on, right?
Yeah, and also maybe for the video we saw, the handshake and the hand movement is like a test phase maybe from the bot. But I think they already shown some things that he did by himself.
They've shown a lot of end-to-end stuff.
Exactly.
They've shown that.
And that's the difference. That's the main difference, I would say.
That is one of the main differences, and definitely going forward, if you're able to train it by showing it, by either showing it in videos or showing it live, what it is you want to do, and if it's able to then sort of pick it up. Now, a lot of the movements that we saw in the robot seem like it's learning from humans, or it's sort of figuring out how to do it. So that's why there was this very, very natural movement. One of the things I pointed out to John yesterday is that when the robot decided to turn its head, it didn't just do this with its head, turn its shoulders too.
Yeah, it leans,
Which is really kind of odd to me, because for a mechanism, it should be able to turn its head around and around and around without any problem.
Just like this,
we do that because when you do it, it kind of hurts your neck muscle a little bit, and it's a little bit easier to take the stress off just by moving your shoulder a little bit. But for a robot, it should just be, it should be more robotic. But it was, looking around up like that, look at my hands, that kind of thing. So that kind of fluidity comes from a neural net understanding its entire body and how it works, and it doesn't come from something that you heuristically program. And it's picking up a lot of cues, it's learning a lot of things. We were thinking like in the squatting with the fingers going out, did it figure that out itself? Or was it actually watching a coach? Because evidently people who are these coaches on it, when you do a squat and you come down like that, they say put your fingers out for some reason, as opposed to clenching your fist.
That's true.
And so it's like, okay, was it observing and saying, I'm going to do that too? And if that's the case, then it means it really is learning by watching other people.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's the big thing. And you've mentioned also different points. AI Day is, of course, the big thing. And I have to say something there. XAI, with their large language model, with Grok, already in place, you kind of see a pattern here that when Tesla develops something, and Elon is pushing something, it's fastly implemented into the workflow flow to get out the nooks and crannies. Because if they would wait with FSD and with the rollout of FSD, like he mentioned, in 1 year, in 2 years, then we wouldn't have FSD right now.
Right.
Because it takes time to iterate in the process. That's the same reason, in my opinion, that they use the Model Y with 4680 batteries, actually. Why did they do that? Do they have to do that? No, they were testing the battery in the field.
Yes.
What is happening there? Then they gathered data. That data came back to the Cybertruck again. And this is something that's so unprecedented, in my opinion, that they don't wait. And of course, sometimes it's bad for the customer. Some people pay it up front and something like this. It's kind of deceptive. And sometimes I also think he's too fast with that, but also with monetizing sometimes, because the product is not actually too much rounded, but it's enough. I would say it has enough value. It's not full self-driving autopilot that people expected, but it's good enough.
It's extremely useful. It's extremely useful. I mean, I've used it, and it just takes all the pressure off on these long drives.
Yeah,
Even though it cannot drive all the way point to point, it's doing like 95% of the driving for me.
That's true.
And I'm far more relaxed. And not only that, it's such a good co-pilot, because it really is a co-pilot, that I can start observing other things and not have this tunnel vision when I'm driving. So I'm actually more aware of what's going on, and I'm less stressed. So a lot of people might say, it's not robotaxi yet. It's like, okay, it may not be, but boy, it makes those long drives much easier. And I've done a couple of very long drives and have discovered that, and everyone else I talk to, they say they feel the same way. They arrive fresh.
You've said that ramping the Cybertruck is a big thing. And I also think that's very important to have the Cybertrucks, because still many people don't believe that this is going to be pumped out. Of course, the delivery event should be maybe with more Cybertrucks, I don't know, but they ramp up production significantly more and more. Now you have the Founder series that you can order and stuff like this. So there will be some rollouts still.
And it's going out to a lot of people that I know, which kind of surprises me that they already are getting a Cybertruck.
That's crazy.
And it appears, and what
really
Joe
happens.
Tegmeyer has been showing is that the production ramp is going quite well. There's a lot of Cybertrucks showing up in the parking lot and going in the back of delivery vehicles.
Crazy.
So, yeah.
Exciting. And going back to the AI day, what synergies do you also see?
Okay.
Will we see a Tesla bot talking to you? Because I
eventually you will. Eventually you will. So, the question is whether that's going to be like a large language model or a large language model that is multimodal, that rather than them doing speech to text and then putting that into a large language model, whether you speak to it and it understands you immediately, because it doesn't convert it to text. And that's what the next level of AIs are going to be, is to kind of avoid that intermediary step,
because
of
it has
listening to you.
Slight delay and everything.
Yeah, slight delay. And when that happens, it's going to not only be in the Tesla bot, it's going to be in Tesla's itself. Because we know right now when you use the voice activation, it takes a while before it figures out what you said. But if you can have an inference chip already in there that's understanding what you're saying immediately and not have to be connected to the internet, because that's what it does. It takes what you said and it has to go out and then wait for the reply. So this is what it is in text, and then decide what it is you're doing. But yes, Optimus will definitely have that to be able to communicate to you and for you to be able to tell it to do something. No doubt about it. And I would not be surprised if we start to see something like that by the next AI day, or at least a discussion of what the architecture is going to be to do that. Because it's always 3 hours long and there's lots of PowerPoints. You have to listen to them closely, and someone's going to mention something like that. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting, especially the implementation of direct communication to the servers. Direct communication and this direct path. FSD 12 doesn't actually have a huge line of code. They generate the code while driving, which is nuts, and the same thing will happen there with the bot, I think. Do you think that this inference chip, could that be the thing that why the torso is a little bit bigger at the Gen 2? Oh, it shouldn't be, because I don't think it's a very big chip. I think the chip is only about, and it's only one chip, it's not two chips. As far as we know, unless they decided to change course. It seems like it's one. And it just looks wider for some reason. I'm just wondering if they put more batteries in. And the other I don't think they went to 4680s. I still think there are 2170s in there, because that's what the original one was. But that is one possibility of why the torso is a bit bigger, if they decided they want to go. But I don't think they're going to go to 4680s. And the reason maybe they finalized the design of the chassis and everything, and then they're going to order the body. But putting 4680s into the bot right now may not make sense, because you need them for the Cybertruck. Now, it is a small number that's going in there, but depending upon the numbers that you have. So it's going to be, 30 to 1 or something like that. So for every 30 bots, that means that's one less Cybertruck that you can produce if you don't have enough batteries. So I'm still thinking that they're 2170s, but they may have decided that rather than being 2.3 kilowatt hours, maybe it's going to be like 3 kilowatt hours or something like that. Maybe they leave some space there because they finalized kind of the design, but it wouldn't also make sense. I'm still not sure about that. I'm not sure. But it could be. I mean that they are flexible. Maybe they have a design for both batteries inside of the chassis, and that's why they just made the torso a little bit bigger. Could be. But it's just speculation. Let's see what Tesla is really doing. Also going forward, maybe the time horizon now further, because now we have the points you discussed the video last time. Went into deep dive as well. We've compared today the Tesla Bot Gen 1 to the Tesla Bot Gen 2, and now going forward to what you see 2030 or something. What you? Oh my goodness! 2030 is going to be crazy. Let's say 25 or something like that. Well, 25 is when you start to really see how the disruption is going on. That the bots are starting to show up in more and more places, and you're beginning to realize that they really are taking over jobs, and that they are capable. And again, they're going to be saying, wow, just imagine what it's going to be in another 18 months from now. And then when you get to 2030, it's almost going to be unrecognizable. Because at that point, you're going to be talking about majority of new car sales definitely being EV at that point. There's still going to be a while to change over the fleets. But the one thing to say is that I'm going on a ski trip to Zermatt, and I've been there before. And what was really interesting, on the way to Zermatt, the Autobahn doesn't make it all the way there. You have to pull over and you actually get onto a train car that goes through a tunnel for like about 11 kilometers, okay? And it's really interesting because it's almost like the concept of the boring tunnel.
Yeah.
It's like, why, my goodness,
the Swiss
this tunnel was built in like I think 1903 or something like that, or 1910. So it's over 100 years old.
Yes.
And yet you're already doing it, that you pull right onto a train and it leaves like, you don't have to wait very long and you're through the tunnel on the other side. Then you get to Zermatt. And you can't actually drive to Zermatt. You have to drive to the village before and take a train to there because Zermatt is EV only.
Interesting.
Yes. Now, yes, Teslas can drive there, but they've also made a lot of smaller electric vehicles to get people around from the train station to the hotels and everything else, like these little ferry services and stuff. Everything is electric. And the first thing you notice is the air quality. Yes, you're in the Swiss Alps, but you can still be in a village in the Swiss Alps and be choking to death with diesel exhaust and everything else.
Of course.
That's the first thing you notice. It's like, the air quality is so good. So you go there and it's like, this is what 2030 will start to look like. Is that you will start living in cities. And the one good thing about COVID, like for people who lived in LA, they could see the mountains for the first time in their lifetime.
Wow, that's so crazy. That's true.
Yes, the air quality was so good. So now what EVs are going to do is they're going to give you the air quality of COVID without COVID. Okay?
Which is a good deal.
Which is a really good deal. Okay? We can have COVID air quality in our cities without the COVID once we go to EVs. So
that's a good deal.
That's what I'm looking forward to in 2030.
Okay.
So that's one aspect, is that the fleet is changing over. People are going to realize how beneficial EVs are going to be for the overall health and many other things, not just the fact that we're no longer going to be dependent on oil and anything else. And then there's all the other disruptions that are coming. With the robots coming on there, what AI is going to be doing, it's going to be unrecognizable. 2030 is not going to look at all like 2023. And 2025 is probably when you're really going to realize that
something's changing.
There is a big change coming. We're starting to feel like the rumbles of it. But by 2025, it'll be very obvious what's happening.
Interesting stuff that's happening in the next couple of years. I think people don't realize that Elon isn't talking BS when he talks about the Cybertruck. It is an almost impossible thing, and the timelines are always off. But innovation doesn't work that way, that you can plan it this way, that you say, okay, we're going to push the limits and expect the timeline to be perfect. It can't happen. It can't happen. It's too difficult.
That's part of
and they are not cautious. They are fast, not cautious. That's the difference. And many companies are cautious. That's why they just push a press release out when they know 100% or 99% that's going to happen. And Tesla not. They're going to push it forward and say, okay, we messed up.
It's pure engineering kind of mentality, is that everyone is waiting for the battery breakthrough. So they kept on saying, we're waiting for some researcher to come up with this miracle battery that's just going to give us everything else.
Somebody has to do it.
And Tesla said, forget it. Even if the breakthrough comes through, it will take so long for us to implement it. They decided to engineer the breakthrough. So the 4680 is not about a breakthrough. It's about a bunch of multiple engineering decisions that gave you 5%, 10% improvement here and there. That overall, when you stack them together, suddenly it feels like a breakthrough.
Totally.
So rather than waiting for it, that's the way they do it. They push forward by saying, let's keep incrementally getting better and better. And the end result is going to be something very good. And it would be great if someone comes up, if Jeff Dunn comes up with a breakthrough in battery technology, but they know it's still going to be 4 to 5 years before you can actually start to implement that as a product. But in the meantime, how do we bridge that gap?
How do you do it? And how do you monetize as well?
And everyone else is sitting around, it's like, well, we're waiting for the battery breakthrough. When the battery breakthrough comes through, we'll think about EVs then. It's like, no, you can do it now if you just do good engineering.
Yeah, absolutely. Your rating for the next years is absolutely positive.
Oh yeah, next 2024 is going to be crazy, because what AI is going to do is going to be nuts. What's going to happen in robotics is going to be nuts. Not just a Tesla bot, but there are a lot of other companies doing it, and who knows what they're going to be showing us.
We have to cover that also.
We're going to see a lot of going on there. So there's going to be a good competition in the area of humanoid robots.
It's almost like the moon landing. When we had the competition with Russia, it was the best thing to happen to the technology, because it went further. And then we went to the moon, and then
Yeah.
How about don't do anything again?
Yeah.
Because there was no need actually. And now we kind of see with robotics that the other companies see that, of course, and now they are a little bit scared, and now the creativity starts to hit again, and now they have the competition and power to do that.
The competition is there, and what it could happen is it could be a lot of spillover from the humanoid robots to traditional robots as well.
Of course.
So it's not that the traditional robots are going to change their form that much. What's going to change is how they are programmed. So everything we're learning from the AI and how to program a humanoid robot will make it easier for the traditional robots. And the other thing we didn't even talk about is that you just brought up the space race and everything. It's like, you know, next year SpaceX is going to have an insane number of traditional launches, you know, and we're going to be having, you know, the Starship going on there. And then maybe Blue Origin is finally able to launch the new Glenn and everything else. So 2024 could also be really crazy when we look at another frontier, not just the EV frontier, but what's going on in space. So there's a lot of disruption that's going to be going on. And
glad we have somebody like Dr. Scott Walter here to cover that as well on all the Tesla channels and all the news outlets talk to you. So thank you very much, Scott, for doing this. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for the outlook for the audience. And for you as the audience, do you have a question? Do you want to ask Scott something? I always share those questions with him. He's on X very actively. I'm going to link it up here. Please follow him there and check out the stuff. It's pretty good. Yeah, Scott, I think we're done with our Glühwein. That's why we need to get another one. So
it's empty.
We're gonna go, and thank you very much for watching. And there's only one last thing to say, and that's goodbye, everybody.